There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. You may have felt it, a heaviness that settled into your bones long before you had the language for it, a sense that the world was asking something of you that no one your age should have been expected to give. Maybe you were the one who kept the peace between your parents. Maybe you learned to read your mother's mood before she walked through the door, adjusting yourself like a thermostat so the household wouldn't overheat. Maybe you were 9 years old, packing your younger sibling's lunch, making sure there was enough bread for the week, and you did it so well that no one ever thought to ask whether you were okay. The child who grows up too fast rarely looks like a child in distress. They look competent, they look mature, and that is precisely the problem. Today, we are going to explore what happens inside the psyche when childhood is abbreviated, not by a single dramatic event, but by the slow, invisible process of being needed too much, too soon. If this kind of reflection is meaningful to you, consider subscribing so we can continue this work together. To understand what it means to grow up too fast, we need to understand what childhood is actually for, and this is where our culture often gets things wrong. We tend to think of childhood as a kind of waiting room, a phase to be gotten through before real life begins. But depth psychology sees it very differently. Childhood is the season when the psyche builds its underground architecture. It is when we develop what Carl Jung called the personal unconscious, the vast basement of emotional experience, memory, and relational patterning that will quietly shape every decision we make as adults. In a healthy developmental arc, a child is allowed to be small, not small in the diminishing sense, but small in the protected sense, like a seed held inside the dark earth, given time and warmth before it is expected to break the surface. The child is meant to receive before being asked to give, to be held before being asked to hold, to be confused, messy, irrational, playful, and free from the weight of adult concerns. What the child internalizes during this period is not information. It is a felt sense of whether the world is safe enough to exist in without performing. When that season is cut short, something subtle but profound happens. The child does not stop developing, but the development shifts direction. Instead of growing roots downward into security, trust, and a sense of inner solidity, the child begins to grow outward, building a structure designed to manage the external world. They become hyper-aware of other people's needs, skilled at reading emotional atmospheres, fluent in the unspoken language of adult tension. These are not pathological traits. In many ways, they are remarkable adaptations, but they come at a cost that often does not reveal itself until decades later. Let me tell you about someone. We will call her Miriam. Miriam was the eldest daughter in a family where her father worked overseas and her mother struggled with chronic anxiety. By the age of 7, Miriam had become the emotional anchor of the household. She would sit with her mother during panic episodes, speaking in a calm, measured voice she had somehow taught herself. She would mediate between her younger brothers when they fought. She organized the grocery list. She kept her grades immaculate not because anyone demanded it, but because she understood, wordlessly, that her family could not absorb another problem. By the time Miriam reached her 20s, she had built a successful career in project management. People admired her poise. She could walk into a room full of conflict and within minutes identify the tension, soothe the parties, and propose a solution. What no one saw was the hollow ache beneath the competence, a gnawing feeling that she did not know who she was when she was not fixing something. When her therapist eventually asked her what she enjoyed doing for herself, Miriam went silent. Not because she was being evasive, but because the question genuinely did not compute. She had spent so long attending to others that her own inner world had become a foreign country she had never visited. This is one of the central paradoxes of premature maturity. The child who grows up too fast often becomes an adult who is extraordinarily capable in the outer world, but strangely disconnected from the inner one. Jung spoke about this dynamic in terms of the persona, the mask we develop to meet the expectations of the world around us. Every person has a persona, and there is nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem arises when the persona develops too early and too completely, before the deeper self has had time to take shape beneath it. Imagine a house that is all facade and no rooms. From the street, it looks impressive, well painted, well maintained, the kind of house that makes neighbors feel at ease. But if you open the front door, there is only scaffolding inside. No furniture, no warmth, no place to sit down and rest. This is what the inner world can feel like for someone whose childhood was consumed by adult responsibilities. The exterior was built beautifully, because it had to be, but the interior was never given the quiet, unhurried attention it needed. There is a concept in psychology that helps illuminate this further, the idea of the parentified child. Parentification occurs when the natural flow of caregiving is reversed and the child begins to function as a caregiver for one or both parents. This can happen in obvious ways, like a child managing a parent's addiction or acting as a translator for an immigrant family. But it also happens in much subtler forms. The child who learns to never bring their own sadness home because their parent is already overwhelmed. The child who becomes the family comedian, performing emotional labor disguised as humor. The child who silently absorbs the tension in a marriage so that neither parent has to face it directly. What makes parentification so insidious is that it often feels like love. The child does not experience themselves as being exploited. They experience themselves as being important, needed, essential, and in a way, they are. But the cost is that their own developmental needs for play, for spontaneity, for being taken care of are quietly shelved, not denied outright, just deprioritized, again and again, until the child forgets they were ever there. Consider another person. We will call him David. David grew up in a household where his parents' marriage was quietly disintegrating. There was no violence, no shouting, just a slow, suffocating coldness that filled every room. David, around the age of 10, began to develop what you might call an emotional sonar. He could sense, from the way his father closed the car door, whether the evening would be tense. He could read his mother's silence, the way a sailor reads the sky before a storm. David became the bridge between his parents, the one who would crack a joke at dinner to dissolve the tension, the one who would sit with his mother afterward and listen to her frustrations, the one who would casually bring up something positive to his father to lift his mood. David was not asked to do any of this, but some deep intelligence within him understood that if he did not hold the emotional center of the family, it would collapse. Years later, as an adult, David found himself in a recurring pattern. Every relationship he entered eventually took on the same shape. He would become the caregiver, the fixer, the one who held things together, and each time, he would eventually feel a suffocating exhaustion, not because the other person was demanding, but because David did not know how to exist in a relationship without carrying it. When a partner once told him, "You can just relax, you don't have to manage this," David felt a wave of something close to panic. Relaxing felt dangerous. Letting go of control felt like inviting catastrophe. And this is one of the deeper psychological signatures of growing up too fast. The nervous system itself becomes wired around vigilance. Rest does not feel like relief. It feels like the moment before something goes wrong. This brings us to something the philosopher Simone Weil once wrote about: the distinction between attention and effort. Weil suggested that true attention is a kind of passive receptivity, an openness to what is, without trying to control or manage it. Effort, by contrast, is the muscular act of imposing our will on the world. The child who grows up too fast becomes a master of effort. They learn to scan, to anticipate, to intervene, but they rarely learn attention in Weil's sense, the ability to simply be present without an agenda, to sit in a room and not immediately calculate what needs to be done. This is why so many adults who grew up too fast describe a strange phenomenon. They can handle a crisis with remarkable composure, but they fall apart during moments of stillness. A quiet Sunday afternoon feels more threatening than a week of deadlines, because stillness is the one environment their childhood never trained them for. If you recognize something of yourself in this, it may be worth pausing here, not to diagnose, not to assign blame, but simply to notice. You might ask yourself, when did I first feel responsible for someone else's emotional state? What did I learn about my own needs during that time? Do I still carry the belief that resting is a form of irresponsibility? These are not questions with quick answers. They are doorways into a longer conversation with yourself. And the value is not in resolving them immediately, but in beginning to sit with them honestly. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of this pattern is that the healing does not look like what you might expect. For most of us, the word healing conjures images of strength, overcoming, pushing through, becoming resilient. But for the person who grew up too fast, healing often looks like becoming weaker, or more precisely, it looks like allowing yourself to be less capable, learning to say, I don't know how to handle this, when your entire identity was built on knowing, learning to cry in front of someone when your body has spent decades treating tears as a system failure, learning to need people not as a strategy, but as a genuine expression of your own incompleteness. Jung described a process he called individuation, which is the lifelong movement toward becoming who you actually are, beneath all the roles and adaptations. For the person who grew up too fast, individuation often involves a counterintuitive regression, not in the pathological sense, but in the sense of returning to the developmental stages that were skipped. You might find yourself, at 35 or 40, suddenly drawn to play, to silliness, to the kind of aimless wandering that you never allowed yourself as a child. This is not a sign of immaturity. It is the psyche trying to complete what was interrupted. There is a beautiful metaphor in nature for this process. Certain trees, when they grow in conditions that are too harsh, thin soil, constant wind, not enough light, develop what arborists call reaction wood. It is wood that grows in response to stress, denser and harder than normal wood, designed to keep the tree standing in hostile conditions. Reaction wood is strong, it does its job, but it is also brittle. It lacks the flexibility of wood that grew under gentler conditions. And if the tree is ever transplanted to better soil, given more sunlight and less wind, something remarkable happens. The new growth that emerges is softer, more supple, more alive. It does not replace the reaction wood. The tree carries both the hard-earned density of its early survival and the new, more responsive growth that gentler conditions allowed. This is what the healing process can look like. You do not erase the competence, the awareness, the strength you built as a child. You let new growth emerge alongside it. Growth that is softer, less strategic, more honest about what it needs. But this process requires something that may feel deeply unfamiliar. Grief. Not grief for a traumatic event, necessarily, but grief for what was never given the space to happen. Grief for the childhood that was spent managing instead of exploring. Grief for the spontaneity that was traded for responsibility. Grief for the version of yourself that might have existed if you had been allowed to be small for longer. This kind of grief does not arrive all at once. It tends to surface in quiet, unexpected moments, while watching a child play unselfconsciously in a park, while hearing a song that for reasons you cannot quite articulate makes your throat tighten, while realizing that you have no idea what you would do with a day that had no obligations in it. These moments are not weakness. They are the psyche signaling that something inside you is still waiting to be met. It is also worth saying that this process does not require you to blame your parents or caregivers. In many cases, the adults who leaned too heavily on a child were themselves carrying wounds they did not know how to manage. Your mother, who needed you to be her confidant, may have been a woman who never had a safe place to put her own pain. Your father, who was emotionally absent, may have been a man who was taught that vulnerability was a flaw. Understanding this does not mean excusing the impact on you. It means holding two truths at the same time: that your caregivers may have done their best within their limitations, and that their best still left something essential, unfinished in you. Both of those things can be true without canceling each other out. What matters now is what you do with the awareness. And here is where the real work begins. Not in understanding the pattern intellectually, which for someone who grew up too fast is usually the easy part, but in allowing the pattern to be felt in the body. in noticing the tightness in your chest when someone offers to help you, in recognizing the faint irritation you feel when a situation is unresolved and you cannot fix it, in letting yourself sit with discomfort that has no immediate solution, because for most of your life, your value was defined by your ability to solve things. The philosopher Martin Buber drew a distinction between two ways of relating to the world. He called them I, it, and I, thou. In the I, it mode, we treat the world and other people as objects to be managed, predicted, and controlled. In the I, thou mode, we meet the world as a living presence, with openness and without agenda. The child who grows up too fast becomes proficient in I, it relating. They learn to read people as systems to be managed, emotions as problems to be solved, and relationships as structures to be maintained. The movement toward healing is a movement toward I-thou, toward meeting yourself and others, not as projects, but as mysteries that do not need to be resolved. This does not happen overnight. It does not happen through a single realization or a powerful conversation. It happens the way seasons change slowly, with setbacks, with days where the old patterns feel as strong as ever. But it happens, and it begins, often, with a moment as simple as this one, sitting still, listening to these words, and allowing something in you to recognize itself, not as broken, not as damaged, but as someone who carried too much, too soon, and who is now, perhaps for the first time, considering the possibility that they are allowed to set it down. The central insight is this: growing up too fast is not a failure of character. It is a testament to the extraordinary adaptability of the human psyche. But adaptability comes with a cost, and that cost deserves to be acknowledged, not with self-pity, but with the same steady, patient care that you once gave to everyone around you, now turned gently inward. This channel is for education and reflection, not a substitute for professional therapy. If anything in today's exploration touched something deep, consider speaking with a qualified professional who can walk with you through that territory with the care it deserves. And if you found value in this conversation, leaving a like or a comment about your own experience can help others find their way here too. Thank you for listening.